चलें जी, ये वीडियो तो हुई खत्म।
ये वीडियो हो गई खत्म. All right, Madan, welcome. Okay, so from this point on, we'll do the English part. And all right.
So
Did you
yeah.
did you get the whole point of this thing, right?
Kind of. I kind of get the gist. I don't know what the exact arguments were though. So what were the arguments that they?
So, but
in instance, what did they say?
Are you aware of the original question from the caller? Because that is it was that was the gist of the entire video. I mean, the entire argument, circle around that. Do you know what the caller actually asked, or should I just present that question? Okay. So the caller asked a very, very logical and valid question. Madan, I'm getting a feedback as usual. So I'll just repeat the question that the caller asked. The caller asked the question that if Allah has created us for a test, then why do children die young? And if they do, and essentially the question more importantly was this: if children die, some we see that some children die in a very young age, then it is actually unfair for those who actually grow up, because they have to go through that test, while those who die young go directly to heaven. So that was his question, that it is unfair to those who are actually going through this life, because they are going through that test to ultimately deserve hell or heaven, while those who die young actually go to heaven directly without any sort of test.
And I think, Madan, sorry, just one small point I will add. So sorry. There are differences between people, the kids of those who believe, and the kids of those who do not believe. So, for argument's sake, we assume that all the kids are going to heaven. For
now,
this this video's sake, pretty much for the time being, right?
For now. And let me also give you the gist of the argument, the response that he actually received from Emaan Union. So there were two primary arguments that they made. One was this, that each human is being tested on as separately by God. There is no competition among humans, according to Mufti Saab. So it doesn't matter whether Allah gives someone test and someone he assigns heaven for no reason or without any test. So according to him, there is no competition among humans. Each human is being tested on his own, and he has to pass his own test. He's in competition with his own self, number one. And number two, another argument which was actually not a response to the question, but they tried to respond it in that way, that every person have their own test, have their own level of test. Each person has different kind of test, but that doesn't mean that Allah is unfair, because Allah knows what kind of test he should take from each person. So that was one way of responding. In fact, and one more argument that they presented was that actually the kids who die young,
it's not the test of the kids, basically.
It's not a test for the kids, rather it's a test for their family, because
parents,
they die young,
basically.
and they have to go through that period of grief and all that. Again, the second and third point are not even a response.
And the people around them, pretty
the
much.
second and third point doesn't even relate to the question, but somehow they presented that as a response to this question. So these were the three arguments that they presented as a response to his question.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So you guys probably covered a lot of it anyway. I think it's kind of common sense, really, right? I mean, the responses.
I mean,
it's common sense for us.
Yeah. The responses are very weak, obviously. I mean, the questioner is very persuasive here. The essence of what he's saying, he doesn't even need to articulate it eloquently. The fairness intuition that he wants to echo is very persuasive. And I don't think any of the counter arguments really deal with it, right? I mean, while it's true that everybody can have an individual test, but then he still needs to engage with the idea that the child who has died was used as an instrument for the test of others. But as a result of that, that child is still compensated. You may say compensated for it by being allowed into the pearly gates of heaven straight away, right? because they died. But that still is an unfairness, right? In the sense, and you probably articulate this already, it is still an unfairness in the sense that it means being this instrument, it means that that child gets a free pass, unlike other children who or other people who have to overcome these grievances, because those grievances and stresses and psychological disorders and problems and hurdles in life are is a it's like they were given a complicated mathematical exam, and the child who died wasn't. I mean, I don't see how this is so complicated, in the sense that why can't these defenders of Islam notice that, right? It's fair and good to say that these children were used as instruments, right? But did they have to be used as instruments? No, I mean, one thing that could have solved this is if those children were not suffering and they were just zombies, right? Like philosophical
Yeah,
zombies.
yeah, I did present that argument. I said that
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
could say
Yeah.
that, but that
Yeah,
doesn't align with their scripture or their hadith or
exactly.
Quran, actually.
Right. Right.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if it was compatible with Islam, then that would have been actually still consistent with the themes of fairness. But if there's like 10 children who have to overcome struggles and then get into heaven, and there's another 10 children who die prematurely, and they don't have to overcome those hurdles, then it's not a fair test, right? Even if those 10 children who died early were compensated, it's not fair that the other ones had to at least risk facing torture and hellfire. In those circumstances, they fail to pass the test. In circumstances where they, because of the horrific horrors and tragedies in life, they lost faith, let's say, or they badmouthed Islam and so on, and as a result, they ended up leaving the faith. That seems like it is an unfair test. The way you can make it doesn't make, just because you're compensating them with heaven doesn't render the test fair. It only means that those children who were fast tracked to heaven, they were given a bit of a free pass, and it
Right.
might
Madid,
go on.
yeah, I just made that point by saying that we can have this thought experiment that two kids who grew up exactly the same way, they were clones of each other in every way, pretty much, right? Up until a certain point, right? But what happened? Okay, sorry, I'll have to change my earplug system. So give me just 1 minute. Carry on, Madin.
No, okay. No, I don't see. I don't think the responses they gave were sufficiently good. The idea that each individual is being tested has nothing to do with it. The person who said that needs to show how the individuals who were killed off early, let's say, they were tested fairly. Sorry, they need to show how the individuals who got killed off early, how they got a fair test, and then in comparison to their test, other people who got getting a fair test as well, right? That it was fair. Fairness means everyone is tested, but in the appropriate and proportionate manner, right?
Exactly. Proportionate
And
manner.
yes, and I don't think kids dying early is a proportionate test, because like I said before, this is a new statement of what I said before. If there's a child who has to grow up in the deserts of Somalia, well, not deserts, but deserts of a country, let's say, or in a very
Saudi Arabia, maybe, yeah.
untrodden place, yeah, that test and challenge is very, very difficult, right? Whereas the kid who was killed early, who may not have any memory of it, who, let's say, died peacefully in one's sleep without any pain and suffering, he is rewarded disproportionately. Heaven, and it doesn't sound fair. So none of those defenses really dealt with it, I think. Yeah, I don't know what else
Yeah,
to say.
yeah.
Say.
The point I wanted to make was I was just giving this thought experiment where two kids, two clones, pretty much you can say, they grow up exactly the same way, but one of them dies at about a certain age, where he's entitled to go to, heaven. But the other one grows up and then at some later point encounters some really harsh conditions, right? And then he ends up going to, hell. Now you would think, as clones, as a thought experiment, at certain point they were exactly the same, pretty much. And had the other one died at that same point, would have gone to, heaven as well. But then this is unfair on him that he went on to live for another whatever years, and just got out of heaven, pretty much. So this seems like an unfair, because it was pretty much the whim of the Almighty that took him out of that.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
also I could probably, even if this is not even a thought experiment no more, what I'm going to present. So just think about this. A child who dies, I think any child who dies, him, any person who dies, whether it's a child or or a grown up person, they have to go through that process, light of death. Now there are grown-ups who have a very painful death. There are children who have a painful death. There are children who go through a very painless death, and there are grown-ups who have a very painless death. So as Mahadin was saying, that if they are being compensated for any sort of pain, if they suffered because of that process of dying for whatever caused their death, then a grown-up also actually, or majority of them, go through that pain, right? So are they also compensated for that pain of the cause of death? Well, no, because they are actually tested based on whatever they did. So whatever the child goes through, a grown up also generally goes through that same process, or the same suffering, if you want to call that a suffering, the suffering of which is caused by that, by death. Then any compensation that that child gets is for something that a grown up also goes through, but he's not compensated the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I think what this evinces is that this was created. These rationales were created on the fly to appease
Yeah,
people who had, appease people who had children who died prematurely or from diseases, or basically
yeah,
just babies who, infant mortality rates in certain countries are extremely high, at least historically, and their child dies, and in order to explain this gap, the most empathically, emotionally satisfying answer is that they're going to go to heaven
yeah.
straight.
so
And the same,
what
He he
same
couldn't he couldn't declare those children philosophical zombies, right? He could
yeah,
because that would have been very cruel for that. That would seem very cruel, because
right,
you,
I
it would
think
meant that their children were like, probably like animal, like, and I don't want to say that, but that is what it would imply, that they were actually
no, yeah, I
meaningless,
mean
just
that
like
that
any other.
that's exactly what I've
Yeah,
implied, that these are animals. And yeah, then but
yeah,
what's the word that's used for, Madin, you said that these all, should I call it shabang, or the drama what was created for emolifying is the word, I don't know, emolifying the aggrieved ones, basically, right?
yes, yeah.
Right.
So what it is it's a piece of evidence. It's a piece of evidence that this is not divinely granted sort of justice system.
Yeah,
It's more
divinely revealed, right, or granted, yeah.
if human beings created these ideas, it would have these holes in it. It would not make sense. You'd have these inconsistencies. It would be on demand created. When a question comes and arises, why did my child die? He didn't get to live his life. We're just going to create a justification, which is that you'll get compensated, and that will appease the mother. But it doesn't. Then it creates the inconsistency, which is that, well, then at the same time, whilst the baby is being compensated, the baby is also was given an unfair advantage, and everybody else is given an unfair disadvantage, and it's not fair. So it creates a
Ma-
problem with that. So by
right.
trying to solve a problem, they've created another one, and you'd expect human beings to do that, right? This seems like human engineered reasoning. Rather, if it was divinely revealed or divinely created, you'd expect something to be a bit more logically sound. And yeah, so this is a piece of evidence, I would say.
So,
So
Madin, Madan, as you said, you can see how the progression of these ideas were taking shape pretty much, right? I mean, it's not that these guys, whoever wrote these things, the scriptures pretty much, they weren't aware of all these problems there that were arising while they were writing and, practicing these things pretty much at that time. Because when they realized that, okay, somebody might just ask the very same questions that probably we are asking, right? So then they came up with 7 layers of heavens and all, or 7 layers of hell and all those things. And okay, who's gonna go to the Jannatul Firdaus, right? Somebody would have said among the warriors, right? I'm gonna go to the war and I'm gonna fight it over there and I'm gonna die. What happens if I get the same, heaven as, someone who's just a kid and who has died without having done anything? What happens then? Okay, you get the Jannatul Firdaus, basically. You get the highest heaven that's possible, right? So for the warriors, you have the highest one. So what happens to the other ones? They get this lower to them and then lower to them. So you see that this ad hoc ideologies, how it is taking shape pretty much, right?
Yeah, it looks like that. Yeah, and this seems to be created ad hoc, like you said, to satisfy the people. The idea, I mean, what these people are doing, what they need to understand that theology is not enough. You need to adduce evidence as well to make sense of things. A lot of people say, there's a compensation that will come about. Well, that might be all good, but it's all theoretical, right? They don't know whether there will be a compensation. So if these gentlemen that we see here on the screen, if they were arguing this motion, at best they would think about a theoretical possibility of a compensation. It's called the compensation doctrine. But one of the problems with the compensation doctrine is that we don't see any evidence for it that there will be a compensation. So people say, as a defense of the problem of evil, is that the evil the suffering that takes place for like innocent children, animals, and so on, or sometimes in animals, but anybody who's been inflicted with some real suffering, like a person with a significant mental illness or disability, they will be compensated. Well, that's all well and good in terms of a consistent form of justice. I mean, even theoretically, it creates these problems, the ones that we're discussing here. But then the problem is there any evidence behind it, right? Because if they're doing philosophy, their purpose is to show some valid evidence as well. And a problem of evil, a problem of suffering doesn't get solved just because you can think of a theoretical possibility of compensation, right? The problem of evil still has a thrust in the conversation in the sense that until we see the evidence of this compensation, there may not be a compensation, right? And all we see is evil. So if somebody shoots a gun and disables another person, you may say that in reality is that this was all for his own good. Yeah. You may also say the person who got disabled will be compensated. Reality, the shooter of the gun was doing something good, and later on we'll find out. But there's no evidence for that. So what do? Do we just sit down and go, oh, okay, he's going to get compensated? Well, ordinarily we won't do that, right? If somebody goes and shoots somebody in the leg, we would put them in prison, right? And we'll say, and if he pleads, well, look, I was doing it for his own good, and in the future you will realize why this was good, or he will get compensated, or in reality this was a good thing. We'll say, okay, when that evidence arises, then I'll let you go from prison. Okay, we will when the new evidence arises, we will retrial you, and then based on the new trial, if you succeed in showing, in fact, it was in his best interest, we will let you out of prison. So this is like the inductive case for the problem of evil, in the sense that at this moment, the evidence suggests that this evil has no answer, right? We don't see the goodness arise from it, right? And therefore, any potential compensation in the future, or any possible goods in the future, is merely theoretical, right? And it's not actual. And therefore, the problem of evil still has its thrust in the debate.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think I had one point to make before you guys want to make any point, Khali.
No. Madan,
But my
we're just
point
getting a
was very
feedback.
different, so I just don't want to break the flow of the conversation.
Yeah.
No, nothing else from my side.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is, if we're doing philosophy, then if you can just say through faith there's going to be compensation, well, the whole point of this discussion that we're having is that we don't have to use faith, right? That's why we have philosophy. Philosophy is there so that we don't have to use faith anymore, right? We can try to use logic, evidence, and so on to patch up these holes, right? And it's not enough to simply say by faith. If we have faith in God, then one of the pillars of faith is that God is going to reward us in a heaven. God is going to compensate for this later on. The problem of evil still has its thrust as an inductive case, because at this moment we don't see that, right? And this is also with Stephen Law's evil God hypothesis. Just as you can make a theoretical possibility that a God can compensate you, an evil God may not compensate you, and in fact might do the opposite in the future, right? So it's compatible with both a good God, this theoretical possibility, and an evil God. So how do we distinguish between an evil God and a good God? When in both situations we can give these ad hoc explanations to explain the evidence away. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the point I wanted to make was, I think we spoke about it a few minutes back, and this is more of a question rather than a point that I want to make here, is that at what point we all agree that it is possible, it is likely that the test might be graded some based on the capability. I might have some different capabilities uh, to my sufferings, to my ability to take as much suffering as somebody else might have. Somebody else might have more and somebody else might have less, right? So what is that tipping point when somebody says, okay, I'm going to give this guy this much suffering, and then his skills are going to tip over towards the heaven, basically, right? I think anybody would be saying that, okay, I'm willing to take this much suffering for heaven. I don't think there's so I'm probably not as clear in explaining what I'm thinking right
I
here.
think so. Yeah, I think I know. I
But
kind of know.
basically, what I'm trying to say here is, anybody, if given a choice, right, I would take as much suffering to enter into heaven, right? So there's no point that tipping scale that I'm not, not going to say that I don't want to suffer. In my eyes, that this test, if somebody says that I'm willing to suffer, but in the end I'll get, heaven, I think everybody is going to say, yes, let me suffer. It doesn't matter. So in this case, kids who are going into heaven for no test, it's still unfair, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
Anybody
yeah.
would opt for that, pretty much.
And then another thing you could say is that, and this is slightly moving away from what you guys have said, is that we possibly should celebrate suffering or death or early premature death. I know that's something that you guys may have raised before,
Yeah.
but
Yes,
We
suffering.
didn't raise this. We did not mention it in this stream, but I did think about mentioning it. But then we moved on. But this is in fact a good point. Yes, you can talk
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I
Right,
mean,
right.
you may want to celebrate the idea that God has killed your. I know I don't mean this literally, but I'm saying based on the framework that the Islamic theology is providing, it might be consistent with that, at least on a psychological level, that you should feel glad. And guess what? Many Muslim advocates do say that. They pat you on the shoulder and go, "Look, he's going to go to heaven. That you should be." And it does seem like a psychological device designed to elicit some degree of balance to the perilous events that has occurred. But technically speaking, you ought to celebrate not just the premature death of a baby, but if you are going through intense suffering.
Any
If there's
suffering, I think that's the point I wanted to drive home. But yeah, right.
yeah,
So any
I mean,
suffering that's given to you, no matter how intense it is, if you know that this is a test, basically, if you have an understanding, you should celebrate it, as you pointed out, Madan, right?
yeah. I
And
mean, let me just quickly say one more thing on that, because let's say a child dies, or not just a child, a person dies. I mean, this is again a bit slightly separate from just the point that I just mentioned now. I mean, not just celebrate it, but you should be happy at death. I mean, I know this is a point that many other people have made, and I know Philo, you've had maybe a little discussion with somebody, a skirmish on the comment section regarding it, and I remember reading it. and they responded, well, why would we celebrate death? I mean, we still, it's like if somebody leaves, and if somebody leaves for going to a different town, let's say, obviously you're going to cry at their absence. So we're not crying at the fact that they're not going to be reunited in a heaven. We're not crying or sad at the prospect that
of
like
missing them, basically, right?
Yeah, we're just missing. Yeah, we are just, the psychological distress is that we're just missing them, right? There's a few things I can say about that. The first thing I'd say, I think obviously it's like a Jordan Peterson-esque argument. Does our behavior necessarily reflect what we actually believe? Right? It's very easy to say that the reason that I am crying is because he's gone on a long holiday, and I'm gonna just, when I die, I'm gonna reunite with them. It's easy to say that, but does the extent of the suffering and trauma and the cries and tears necessarily reveal that's what you genuinely believe? Right? Because if you genuinely believed it, it might be a different form of crying. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'd say is that this is what Shelley Kagan made in his book Death. He's actually written a book on death itself. That, in fact, no, it's not. It's distinguishable from a person who just leaves. And he gives an example of, imagine somebody gets into a rocket and he flies off to space, right? And then you learn that this person is never going to come back, right? Now imagine another scenario where the person flies off to space, but then you learn that something went wrong in the rocket and the person died. Now, in these two thought experiments, in the second one, the latter one, it's a different type of emotion that's generated, right? And the first one is the emotion of this person's going to be absent from my life for the remainder of my life. In the second one, on the other hand, it's a far more devastating loss, and therefore there is something extra in death, and that's what Shelley Kagan says. That people are not responding in the same sense that they would lose somebody because they got lost in space. Rather, people are responding to death in a way that this is permanent, and this is or that the suffering was so bad, and so on. And therefore, if a theist says is that it's just like a long absence, it's unconvincing, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree to that. All right. So, I don't know. I think I had a few things to show. Kelly, should we show those? Okay, there are a few comments. Let's take those comments and then.
Yeah.
Bhragu, what says space and technology per bhi video banao? So, Madan, what he's saying is we should make videos on space and technology as well.
Yeah. I know most of that is in English, right?
Yeah, but what do you mean by that, Bhragu?
By the way, I've got
maybe something on.
I was going to say I've got a massive interest in like automation and AI, ethics of AI, and so on. So that might be interesting, but I'm not necessarily space, but technology, as in all the technological implications on our behavior and impacts on.
I mean, you mean technology where philosophy and comes in to the picture
Exactly.
as well, right?
Yeah, I've written a few pages when I was back in the day.
Cloning,
Cloning. Yes.
And all sort of wherever ethics comes into question, so that's what.
Yeah,
Right.
Those are interesting things. Yeah, Bhragu. Bhragu, what I would say is, if you wrote here, that's all good and appreciated. Why don't you write it underneath as a comment after the stream is done, and so that'll stand out more in our memories, basically, and we probably will work towards it then. So. Anyways, yeah, there were a couple of other comments as well. Tanmoy Ghosh is saying this channel needs a boost. Valuable discussion are just going unwatched. That is a loss. We do appreciate that comment, Tanmoy, and that's why I'm saying that if you really like these our conversations and our streams, then I would say that you make it a point that you spread our channel to wherever you can. Basically, spread it as much as you can. Do try to comment underneath once the streams are over. Basically, that that gives a boost to our channel on the YouTube algorithms, and then more and more people get to watch it basically. But yeah, I mean, a couple of things you can do is, like, subscribe. I think you are already subscribed, but I can't say for sure. And yeah, I mean, spread it as much as you can. So yeah, I think couple of other maybe. Yeah, I don't think there are other comments here. Anything more to add, you guys, Kelly, Madan?
No, nothing more from my side. I think we have already added a lot
Yeah.
of
So what I wanted to ask
in it.
Kelly you
Yes.
was that we discussed a few one or two hadiths, and then
Hmm.
one of the video that I wanted to show was that of Mufti. What's his name? Mufti
Asim
Asim
al
Al
Hakim.
Hakim,
Yes.
right?
I
And
don't think.
I think we made the point already,
Yeah,
so I
we've
don't
already
think
made
that
the
we
point. I
need to
don't think we need
go
to.
into that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go into
we
that. I
already
don't
made
think we
that
need to.
point, so we
Yeah,
don't need to go into that.
yeah.
Let me ask: was this caller who asked the question satisfied, or did he like
He
what
didn't. He
happened?
did not seem satisfied. Because he kept and in fact he was a Muslim actually, but he kept retaliating as if you know that he it was obvious that he was not convinced by their answer, because he said that no, but it still seems unfair that one is not getting tested at all, and the other one is actually going through a test to in order to go to heaven, while the other actually has no test at all. And so he kept sort of repeating his question, but at the end he said okay, okay, and but he left. He didn't say much at the end. And then, because they repeated their points, their responses, they, as we mentioned, that the kind of responses they were giving weren't actually addressing the question at all. So he repeated his question I think
Yeah,
3 times, but then at the end he said okay. He just said
I
okay,
think he seemed massively dissatisfied
unconvinced,
with the
uh,
answers. Yeah, I
massively
mean, he
unsatisfied.
said, I'll." I mean, he was really polite to finally
Yeah.
say, "Okay, I'll just look at these things," and
Yes.
but they, yeah, I mean, you could see that they were just circling around, not giving answers, uh, doing straw man
No,
and
I don't
yeah.
know. They might be convinced by their own responses. I don't know. They might be. It seemed
No,
that they are
I'm not
convinced.
saying.
They
I mean, their
themselves.
responses were
They
unconvincing. I'm
themselves.
saying maybe if I
Yeah.
said that they are themselves convinced, maybe I misspoke. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But I don't think the caller was convinced. I think it
yeah.
was
No,
obvious to
the
me at
caller
least.
didn't seem to be. I mean, maybe for all we know, he's already immortal.
let's
Okay,
not. Let's not. Let's not
we
say
don't wanna
that.
put him in a
Maybe he's
spot
not.
of bother.
Yeah. 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 Maybe he's not.
Yeah,
Don't
maybe.
say
But
that because
it's a huge shout out to this guy for
yeah.
this brilliant question, by the way. Right?
Very good question. And yes,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
and it's very sensible of you to realize that actually they were not addressing the question. He
Right.
didn't say that
Okay.
out loud, but that is what uh, uh, he was.
Yeah.
It was obvious because he kept repeating his question.
Right, right, right. And I think I have asked the same question to Wajdi Saab probably quite some time back. I think not exactly in the same vein, but yeah, similar
I
question
think it
that
was a
if
different question. Wasn't your question about whether it makes sense? It would make sense from Islamic perspective to actually kill children. Wasn't that the question? I mean, and we're not encouraging it at all. But there was a
maybe
question
yeah, we
like
are
that.
not encouraging. I think maybe I asked the question. Maybe I asked to in one of the streams somewhere. It seems like, but my memory could be failing me. But
Yeah,
I seem
and
to have
sorry.
asked some question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just to further clarify, I'm not even saying that Islam actually endorses killing children. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Nobody's
were just
saying,
taking we were just
yeah.
taking a point to its logical conclusion. So,
Right, right, right. It's just a thought experiment in a sense. Yeah, I
yes,
mean, a thought suggestion, maybe you can call it.
yeah,
But
we don't
yeah,
have
I
to go
mean,
too
I
into too
just
much
want
detail
to.
over there, but yeah,
We just want to be extremely clear here, and since all three of us are here, and three of us, as in Mahadin, Kali, and myself, and who are the hosts and co-hosts of this channel, and we have I don't think we have any content that if anybody feels like is hate content, please point to us and why you think it's a hate content. our funda, if you want to call it, our motto is pretty simple. What we want to do is we want to poke holes at ideologies, and especially with Islam, because that's what we understand, all of us understand best, and not with any Muslim. We all have real close ones who are Muslims, basically. So friends, families, and you can say, right? And so yeah, just wanted to make this. Probably I have we don't do this enough, so that because we keep getting these kind of comments underneath some of our streams that you guys are Islamophobes and Islam haters, and but I think you won't find any of our streams where we have been, we have stereotyped any particular community. I don't think, not
Yeah.
at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was this one guy I think named well, obviously. Remember?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I probably, Madan, you realized that my response was particular to him, pretty much, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
particularly
yeah.
to him. Yeah,
I mean, I wrote a response to him regarding what he said about conversion rates, which he just made up on the fly. I think you may have read it, Philo.
yeah, I
Um,
did, yeah.
and I went into detail about it, about how it's flawed, and he just didn't respond. So I don't know if he's listening. I mean, if he wants to talk about anything, then he can. But otherwise, he's been very behaving very badly, basically. And
Yeah, I
even though
mean, I have granted him that there'll be Madan and everybody who's listening, who's probably, those who are listening, who they really want to listen to us. There'll be people who are gonna hate you no matter what, right? Whatever you do, right? They're gonna just hate you because you don't align with what they think or what their ideology is, basically, or what their worldview is, pretty much, right? So, but the point is, I think our demeanor, I think we have all been very restrained in our responses. Probably that's not our nature as well. I mean, we are here to do philosophy, in a sense, pretty much, right? And tackle these arguments critically and analyze them, pretty much, right? So that's our fundamental goal or primary goal, pretty much, right? So I think we are achieving that, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna, attain some good attendance as well. Maybe it might take a few months, maybe, but I'm hopeful of that. Yeah.
that Birigu Vat says, I think we don't give justice to this world if we tell someone about Jannat, because after that they will not be loyal or much good things to this world. I mean, I think that might be conjecture, really. I'm not sure necessarily the concept of heaven being necessarily causes that. That we would require empirical evidence, right? We'll need to do like a sociological study to show whether or not being in, you need to be academically about it to show whether or not just the concept of religious kind of leads to lack of loyalty. And I think there's a mixed picture from studies suggesting that. But what I would say from that, what this comment inspires me to think, is that something that you said, Briguvats, about technology, that we should talk about technology in the sense that I have been discussing stuff about technology, and I've been to quite a few conferences and so on, where there is this emphasis on the modern day. In the next 100 years, there's going to be a lot of technological changes, transformations in almost everything. I'm not sure whether or not the Islamic world, if you want to call it, is necessarily up to scratch to welcome these things, precisely because there's a different sort of mentality. Let me just give you one sort of example. The prospect of life extension, or the alleviation of even death, the reversal of death, or the preventing death in the first place, or the prospect of immortality, which at this moment is is a specious science right now, but is getting there. And in principle, it seems as though it might be a possibility that we may be able to tap into that. But there is a massive opposition from some religious people. Some, I'm not going to say it's all Muslims, and it's not even necessarily an Islamic thing, it could be a Christian thing, but there is this kind of unwillingness to entertain the prospect in the first place, simply because death for them is inevitable. It's something that is permanently sealed and predicted and predetermined. And there's a clash there, right? There's a clash between futurists who think that maybe we can have the technology one day to become immortal. And then you have people who are thinking that, look, this is not going to be possible at all. So that leaves us at a kind of a culture clash, in the sense that there are some people out there who are so invested in defending the ideology that says that death is inevitable that they might think it's blasphemous to even try to prevent it to that extent. And not necessarily to prevent suffering or alleviate suffering or increase life mortality, increase one's lifespan, but trying to look for solutions of death, which they might think is haram, right? And so we have a culture clash there. So inspired by your comment, Brigu Vats, I mean, I know I went off in a bit of a philosophical detail there, but I do see that a lot. I talking to people where a lot of really ultra religious, conservative religious people are unwilling to even talk about this, right? Where they think that this is not something that we should be thinking about or talking about. So they're very much devoted to the idea that this is, they want the very basic rudimentary life of this is life. We do a few things here. Yes, we can alleviate some suffering here and there, but ultimately no, and that they kind of want to stick to this kind of, century-old conception of life. But the Western world, especially elites and elite societies and places where very scientific, very elaborate and scientific advancements are happening, they are moving away from that. And I'm just skeptical how we can reconcile the two different worlds, right? One world who's hell bent on remaining regressive, and the other world which one is bent on becoming progressive.
All right, Madan, I think on that note, what we're going to do is, Khali and Madan, I'm going to run this stream a little further ahead, and you'll recognize someone you know.
फिर कभी आऊंगा तो कौन है नीचे? ओहो, अच्छा ये है। फिलोसेपियंस को ले लेते हैं। जी भाई, फिलोसेपियंस आप लास्ट।
All right.
All right. I think you guys know that guy.
Which one is this? Is it
I think it
the
was the
one where
last time
you?
I went. I think I raised the
Uh-huh.
objection to ontological argument,
Okay,
basically,
the
right?
last
This
one.
is that one, basically, right? His version of.
Mhm.
Let me
The one
just
that ended your life.
the one that ended my career, basically ended my life, my career,
He
and everything.
actually he changed the title of the video. The guy who uploaded that video, he
Right,
had
right,
earlier titled it "Another Atheist Life Ended."
right. I
And I
think
was like,
he
okay. And
somebody
then someone in the
suggested him.
comments,
Yeah,
someone in the
somebody
comments actually
suggested to
suggested you
him
should
that,
change it to
yeah,
career.
dude, you're doing a disservice. You're not being. Look at your akhlaq, man. What are you
Yeah.
doing, right? And
So
so he changed it. Yeah.
change it
Okay.
to career. So yeah.
Yeah.
So probably your career is already over. I mean,
Yeah, my career is already over, guys. What are you guys doing with me?
Is that what they said to you? You're crazy. Is that what they said to you? Is that what they
Right.
is
said
that
to you? It was over.
well? Actually,
No,
there usually people. There are a lot of channels who actually cut videos from Mufti Saab's streams, and then they make their own clips. So there is a
right,
channel separate from Mufti Saab's own channel who make clips. So they made a clip for of this discussion that Philo had with Mufti Yasir on the ontological argument, and he presented it that way that another atheist career ended, as if they presented a very strong response to Philo's question.
right.
And in fact, if you
The
go in the comment section, I also pasted a screenshot of a comment that was there under that video, which actually totally agreed with Philo's question, because Mufti's version of ontological argument was required empirical evidence,
right
which I think is quite not what an ontological argument um, how it's not how that
requires
works.
basically
Yeah,
ontological
ontological
is
argument is a
completely
purely
philosophical
philosophical
argument,
and
right?
deductive argument, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
it's
mean
not supposed to have
completely
any
deductive.
empirical, it should not require any empirical evidence, whereas the Mufti's first premise required empirical evidence. There was no way around it. He could not deductively reach at the conclusion that every human who's alive today or who has ever existed in the past, each and every one of them has imagined God. So I mean,
I think the way he worded was I think we went through it with Madan as well. The way he worded, and I just wanted to clarify. I don't think I don't know if I did clarify with Mufti Saab on that conversation or not. But the way he worded was something a supreme being is imagined
Objectively
by
is
yeah
imagined
is
objectively.
imagined objectively, and this is something I wanted to ask him this question. What do you mean is
What do you
imagined,
even mean?
or is imagined, or can be imagined? Because these are two things basically,
Two
right?
are two totally different things, and I think Mufti Yasir clarified that his view is that it is imagined.
Right, he did and then below his premise 1 and premise 2, he wrote 100% true. And I
100%.
was
Yeah,
wondering which
he
philosopher
wrote
would
that in
write
brackets.
his underneath their premises that it's 100% true.
100% true.
I mean, by doing that, what they've done, first of all, the ontological argument doesn't even need that premise about human
Exactly.
ontology. So by doing that, they just made it a bit weaker. If it's dependent upon that premise, then that premise is the most hardest one to establish. Arguably, I don't think it is, because I think the rest of the premises are difficult as well. But that premise is the hardest one one of the hardest ones to establish. And if it's dependent upon that, that Mufti guy has basically objectively made the ontological argument weaker. Yeah.
We made a lot of fun actually of his argument, because even we made
See,
a community post about it.
I can't blame Mufti Saab. He gives us so much content.
I mean, we made a community post about that even Mufti has actually butchered the argument even further. The ontological argument already being quite, uh, I would say,
Quite weak, yeah.
quite weak. He has made this. He sent his to his grave.
I think it was already on
Yeah.
crutches. When I went
Yeah.
to Madin, I don't know if I told you, when I went to
He
Mufti
actually
Saab's
said that.
stream, I
Yeah,
told him
Madin
that
Philo
Mufti
said
Saab,
that. Philo said that to
yeah,
Mufti's face, actually.
yeah. I
And
told him
Mufti has, yeah.
it's the whole argument is already on crutches, and you took it to its grave pretty much.
He said that he said that to Mufti, and Mufti's response was this. Mufti Asai's response was that, well, if my argument was so weak, still, your guide was not able to deal with it.
Yeah,
That was his response.
Which
right.
guy? Which guy?
Awais Iqbal, because he
Awais
actually
Iqbal.
presented this argument to Awais Iqbal.
Maybe that was right. I don't think
I think he
Oasis.
might be right. He might be
Yeah.
right in that response. He indeed was not able to deal with it
No, I think these guys.
in a
I
very
think
reasonable manner.
these guys in private, like this Mufti guy in private, and maybe that other guy. The Mufti guy in private, and maybe the other guy. I think if you talk to them in private, you can have a more holistic, balanced discussion.
Probably.
Probably, yeah. Because I think the way we can really get into the fine nitty gritty details of things, and we don't necessarily have to be extremely challenging. And given that there's no
Yeah.
public presence, these guys would probably fumble under pressure, because I can't
Mm.
see them really being like that. Maybe they like this in front of people where they've got an audience and so on, but in private, I think they would understand the difficulties of their argument.
Yeah.
I hope so anyway.
Yeah,
Because I've seen threads, private threads on Facebook, with Muslims discussing the difficulties of the problem of evil amongst themselves. They find it difficult, just as difficult as all other people.
I think only person that honest probably, and maybe not that honest, somewhat honest, that I think among the whole plethora of scholars that I know is Yasir Qazi probably.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's
he's
very
one of the
honest.
more honest guys who at least takes some of the things to be maybe who was telling us. I think Cosmic was telling us, right? No, somebody was telling us, right, that he might as well be
I
a
said that.
closet. Yeah, we don't want to go there, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want
Let's
to
not
go there.
expose our guy.
Yeah, we don't want to go
Don't
there.
reveal
Yeah.
his identity.
I think I have to go now, so I'll let you guys, if you want to continue, or if you want to shut the stream
No,
down.
I think
No,
we're gonna
I
close
think we're
the
gonna end
stream.
it.
We're gonna
Yeah.
close the stream. It was a good stream, definitely. So yeah. Any closing comments you want to put, Madin, Khali?
No.
No,
All right,
nothing
I'm
from
just
my
gonna.
side. Just listen to the video, add comments after the stream ends. If you like the video, add your own point of view. Why do you think Mufti's argument was valid? If you found him valid, his response valid, and if you think that his response was not, why do you think so? Do add that in the comments after the stream ends.
All right.
And
Great.
like as well.
Yeah. Like, subscribe, and share. Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you both, Mahaden and Kali. All right. Thank you guys for joining and staying put for so long. See you guys in the next stream. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.